Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The following analysis undertakes a detailed evaluation of Alessandro Volta's 1800 communication to the Royal Society, a foundational text that announced the invention of the electric battery and articulated the theoretical framework underpinning its operation. This essay proceeds by examining the explicit claims, experimental descriptions, and theoretical assertions presented by Volta in a sequential manner, assessing the internal logic and empirical support for each proposition within its historical and intellectual context. The objective is to provide a granular critique of the work itself, elucidating the profound insights and the significant theoretical limitations embedded in one of science's most consequential documents. The power of Volta's announcement resides in its dual character as both a detailed blueprint for an unprecedented instrument and a polemical treatise intended to secure a definitive victory in his long-standing intellectual contest with the proponents of animal electricity. Section 1, the artificial electric organ and foundational claim. Volta's letter to Sir Joseph Banks commences with an act of brilliant scientific rhetoric. He introduces his apparatus, which he terms the appareil colon or column apparatus, by framing it as an artificial recreation of the organe électrique of the torpedo or electric eel. This strategic analogy immediately situates his physical contrivance within a celebrated biological mystery, effectively claiming this territory for the domain of physics. The core assertion here is that a stack of metallic discs can reproduce the physiological effects of a specialized living organ. The evaluation of this claim reveals its power as a conceptual bridge. By positing an identity of effect between his pile and the fish, Volta bypasses the question of inherent vital force and suggests a common, underlying physical principle. He argues that his device, composed entirely of inanimate conductors, generates a continuous flow of electric fluid analogous to the creature's shock. This opening gambit is less a literal scientific equivalence and more a powerful heuristic. The anatomical structure of the torpedo's electric organ, with its stacked columns of electrocytes, provided an irresistible visual and functional parallel. Volta's claim thus succeeds in its primary purpose. It recasts the debate, moving the focus from a unique biological essence to a generalizable physical law of electricity that life itself happens to employ. The validity of his claim rests on the production of similar physiological sensations, a criterion he will develop in subsequent sentencing. This introductory analogy, a foundational premise for the entire experimental program he is about to on. Section 2, the architecture of continuous current. Following the introductory framing, Volta presents the explicit construction of the apparatus. His description is one of methodical, empirical discovery. The fundamental unit of his device is a triplet: a piece of copper or silver, a piece of tin or preferably zinc, and a disc of cardboard, leather, or other porous material soaked in a saline or acidic solution. The column is built by repeating this sequence: silver, zinc, wet disc, silver, zinc, wet disc, and so on. The primary claim within this section is that this specific serial arrangement of dissimilar metals and moist intermediaries is the source for continuous and cumulative electrical action. He specifies that the order is crucial: reversing a single pair negates its effect, indicating a polarity in the system. The evaluation of this constructive claim is straightforwardly positive. It represents a monumental empirical breakthrough. Volta provides a clear, replicable procedure for creating the world's first source of sustained electric current. His choice of metals, particularly zinc and silver, was the result of his extensive prior experiments in ordering conductors by their electromotive potential. The genius of the construction lies in its amplification. A single pair of metals produces a weak effect, but by stacking 20, 40, or 60 such pairs, the intensity, which he measures by the sharpness of the physiological shock, increases in direct proportion. This demonstrates an understanding of serial addition of potential. A latent critique, however, lies in what the description omits. The successful operation of the pile depends on factors Volta understood tacitly but failed to fully articulate, such as the contact pressure between elements and the optimal saturation of the moist separators. His description presents an idealized blueprint, the success of which in other hands would depend on a degree of artisanal skill in replicating these unstated parameters. Section 3. The human body as galvanometer with the apparatus constructed. Volta turns to its effects, using the human body as his primary detection instrument. This section makes a profound and revolutionary claim that all the phenomena previously attributed by Luigi Galvani and his followers to animal electricity are, in fact, physiological responses to an electric current generated externally by metallic contact. Volta describes a series of experiments performed on himself. Touching the terminals of a sufficiently large pile produces a distinct shock, a convulsive sensation that travels up the arms. This directly mimics the famous frog leg experiments but removes the animal tissue from the causal chain of generation. He then details more subtle effects. When he places metallic probes from the pile's terminals to his tongue, he experiences a sharp. As a dictaste, he connects the pile to his eye, either by touching a wire to the eyeball or the eyelid, and perceives a flash of white light. His argument is that the body's nervous system is an exquisitely sensitive electrometer. The nerves of touch report a shock, the nerves of taste report a flavour, and the optic nerve reports light, each translating the stimulus of the electric fluid into its own specific sensory language. The evaluation of this claim marks it as the decisive turning point in the debate. Volta systematically reinterprets every key piece of evidence for animal electricity as a misattribution. The source of the power is the metals, the body is the detector. This conceptual reversal is total. He demonstrates that the electrical fluid is a single, universal substance, and its effects on living tissue are contingent upon the tissue's specific physiological function. There is one form of electricity which produces many sensations. This was a triumph of unifying physical principles over explanations that relied on specialized vital forces. Section 4. The theory of electromotive force by metallic contact. Herein lies the theoretical heart of Volta's entire enterprise. Having demonstrated the construction and effects of the pile, he posits a mechanism. The central theoretical claim is that the electromotive force, the will or tension that drives the electric fluid, originates exclusively at the point of contact between the two dissimilar metals. In his model, when a disc of silver touches a disc of zinc, an immediate and persistent imbalance of electric fluid is created. The silver becomes slightly negative, the zinc slightly positive. The interposed moist conductor, according to Volta, plays a passive role. Its function is merely to conduct the electricity from the zinc of one pair to the silver of the next, allowing the individual tensions of each metallic junction to summate along the column. He explicitly argues that the contact between the metal and the moist conductor is of a secondary, inferior class and contributes little or nothing to the primary motive force. The critical evaluation of this claim reveals it as both brilliantly insightful and fundamentally incomplete. Volta's focus on metallic contact correctly identified that the dissimilarity of conductors was the essential prerequisite. His contact tension is a direct conceptual ancestor of the modern idea of work function and contact potential. However, his vehement insistence on the passivity of the moist conductor, the electrolyte, was a significant error. This insistence was polemically necessary for him to fully defeat the animal electricity school, which located the electrical source in the biological fluids. To concede any active role to the fluid would be to give ground. Yet, we understand now that the sustained current of the pile is an electrochemical phenomenon. The energy is derived from chemical reactions, specifically oxidation at the anode, which is the zinc, and reduction at the cathode, which is the silver or copper, with the electrolyte providing the medium of ion transport that completes the circuit. Volta's theory could account for the initial potential difference, a static effect, but it failed to explain how a continuous current, which performs work, could be sustained without a continuous input of energy. The irony is that the chemical reactions he dismissed, evidenced by the slight corrosion of the zinc plates, were the very source of his piles enduring. Section 5. The principle abstracted in the currentaces to buttress his theory and demonstrate the generality of his discovery. Volta introduces a second form of the apparatus, the crown of cups, or currentaces. This device consists of a series of cups or goblets filled with a saline solution. Into each cup is placed a strip of silver and a strip of zinc, with the metals arranged so they do not touch each other within the cup. The silver strip of the first cup is then connected by a wire to the zinc strip of the second cup, the silver of the second to the zinc of the third, and so on in a repeating chain. The claim here is that this arrangement, though different in form, functions on the exact same principle as the pile and produces identical electrical effects. By creating this alternative construction, Volta elegantly proves that the phenomenon is independent of the vertical, stacked geometry and the use of porous separators. The essential element is the repeating sequence of three conductors: metal A, moist conductor, metal B, connected in series. The evaluation of this section shows it to be a masterful piece of experimental argumentation. The crown of cups isolates the fundamental principle. It also makes the role of the different conductors visually explicit. The electromotive force is generated by the bimetallic couple, and the liquid serves to conduct this influence to the next couple in the series. He notes, as with the pile, that the strength of the effect is proportional to the number of cups in the chain. This successful generalization greatly strengthened his case that he had discovered a new, fundamental law of electricity, a law dependent on the intrinsic properties of conductors and applicable in varied physical arrangements. It removed any lingering suspicion that the effect might be an artifact of the pile's specific compressed structure, such as a triboelectric or piezoelectric effect due to pressure. Section 6. Observations on chemical action and their subordination. Toward the end of his letter, Volta describes an observation that, in retrospect, contained the seed of his own theory's revision. He notes that when the circuit of a powerful pile is completed through a cup of salt water, bubbles of gas are seen to form on the metal wires immersed in the liquid. He correctly identifies this as a decomposition of the water itself. The claim he makes about this phenomenon is, however, one of subordination. He presents this chemical decomposition as a curious effect of the electric current, a secondary action performed by the fluid once it has been set in motion by the primary force of metallic contact. He sees it as proof of the current's power, but he does not recognize it as integral to the current's production. The evaluation of this interpretive claim highlights the powerful influence of prevailing theoretical commitment. For Volta, the entire edifice of his argument rested on the principle of metallic contact as the sole electromotive agent. To admit that a chemical reaction was fundamental to the process would be to reopen the door to Galvanian ideas, where fluids and their interactions with metals were central. Consequently, he had a strong intellectual motivation to relegate the chemical phenomena to the category of effects. This was, from the perspective of later science, his most significant oversight. Scientists like Humphrey Davy and William Nicholson would almost immediately seize upon this very phenomenon of electrolysis, using the pile as an instrument of chemical analysis and, in doing so, gathering the evidence that would eventually lead to the electrochemical theory of the cell. Volta reported the evidence that would correct his own theory, yet his framework compelled him to misinterpret its significance. It is a classic illustration of how a revolutionary theory can contain the varied anomalies that will lead to its future modification. Conclusion. In summary, Alessandro Volta's 1800 communication stands as a monumental work of experimental genius and persuasive argument. The evaluation of its claims reveals a series of profound successes. His construction of the pile and the crown of cups provided humanity, with its first source of continuous electric current, an instrument that transformed science and technology. His reinterpretation of physiological sensations as the response of the nervous system to an external physical stimulus was a decisive blow against the theory of unique animal electricity unifying the phenomena under the umbrella of a single physics. His generalization of the principle through different apparatuses demonstrated a robust and fundamental discovery. At the same time, a critical assessment of his core theoretical claim, that of the exclusively metallic origin of the electromotive force, shows it to be an incomplete and ultimately flawed model. His subordination of the observed chemical effects was a necessary consequence of his polemical stance, but obscured the true electrochemical nature of his own invention. The letter is thus a testament to the complex nature of scientific progress, where a powerfully predictive and instrumentally revolutionary framework can simultaneously contain fundamental conceptual errors. Volta's pile worked, and it worked for the reasons he described, but the ultimate source of its energy was located in the very chemical processes he relegated to the periphery. He built the door to the electrical age, and turned the key, even if he misidentified the mechanism of the lock. The work's enduring significance is therefore twofold. It provided the practical tool that created the field of electrochemistry, and its theoretical assertions formed the essential, albeit temporary, scaffold upon which our modern understanding of electricity was built.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.